Hey everyone, Supervisor Dom Zanger here. I just want to take some time to have a little bit of a discussion here about a sort of growing problem in the community, problem that I've noticed, and it's a problem with dogs. It's a problem with specific types of dogs, with pit bulls, namely. I know there's a lot of passionate people, and there's a lot of passion around this issue around certain dog breeds, and I get that because people love their dogs, and I love my dog, and I totally understand. I just ask that people hear me out on this video before jumping to any conclusions about what I'm saying. There is some realities that we need to talk about, that we need to acknowledge, so that we can all kind of get on the same page. And we just want to be safe. We just want to have a good community. The reason that I'm even talking about pit bulls right now is because there's just been some problems I've been noticing recently locally. I'm seeing this stuff on social media, these sort of issues with, loose dogs and loose pit bulls attacking and this and that. And so I just did a cursory glance and saw some information. I went through and looked at, has this been a problem in the past here locally? Have pit bulls been a problem in the community? So I pulled up some data here, and what I found was that we have had some issues with pit bulls. These are just different articles. I pulled up very cursory research. Pit bull pulls small dog from owner and kills dog. Man injured, dog killed in Hollister pit bull attack. Two pit bulls attack neighbor's dog. Pit bull attack 5-year-old boy. Leaves the boy with 16 stitches in his leg. Aggressive pit bulls go on cat killing spree. Small dog hospitalized after attack from loose pit bull. And that last one was just last week. This stuff is happening. There is an issue here somewhat with these dogs. And so I just want to have that discussion and kind of go over some things, because really the biggest problem is if people aren't aware of their dog's natural characteristics, if they're not aware of certain things about their dogs, that's really where the problem can come from. So we need to sort of have that honest discussion. The owners are a huge responsibility. They're a huge part of what makes a dog good or bad. But there is dog breeds. There is breeding characteristics. That's how breeds work. So there's all kinds of, there's hunting dogs, there's herding dogs, there's comfort dogs. The border collie is a dog. It was bred to herd sheep. That's what it does naturally. That's what it does, And there's no reason we should think that pit bulls should be an exception to how breeds work, And pit bulls were bred to fight. That's what they were bred to do. Originally, they came from bullfighting dogs. They were bred to fight bulls, and then over time, they've been selectively bred and morphed into dog fighting dogs. And so that's where the name comes from the fighting pits. That's where the pit comes from. We call them pit bulls. I mean, they go by plenty of different names: Staffordshire Terrier, American Bullies, Pit Bull Terrier, lots of variations, but we're talking about the same type of dog. And everyone can kind of see it, and they know what it is when they see it. They know no one doesn't know what a pit bull is. We all know what it is. And so I'll just say again, it's irresponsible to not acknowledge that breeds exist and that breeds have inherent characteristics. And it doesn't mean that everything's set in stone and every dog's going to behave the same exact way in every situation. But it does mean that there are potentialities, there are inclinations for dogs to act certain ways. Different breeds act certain ways. Okay. And the pit bull, like I said, it was bred to fight. It's an effective dog for this. I mean, they have an extremely high pain tolerance. They have a certain amount of aggression that can come out suddenly. They have a very strong bite. They have a bite and shake sort of technique that's built into them. So these things, they make them good for what they're good for. And unfortunately, that can cause a lot of problems in a community. And I know everyone knows the nicest pit bull in the world. I do too. You have a pit bull, your friend has a pit bull, and they're the sweetest thing in the world. I know that's the case. I know there's so many sweet pit bulls, like any dog, but we need to acknowledge the statistical reality of the dogs. And so we can go over some of the numbers. So despite being only 6% of the dog population, pit bulls are responsible for more than 60% of the fatalities. 60% of the fatal attacks on humans are from pit bulls. So that's an overrepresentation of 1,000%. It's hard to ignore. It's impossible to ignore, if we're being honest. Pit bulls are the number one canine killer of children. They account for more than half of the child deaths from canines. Pit bulls are responsible for 90% of the attacks on other animals that come from dogs. So of all other dogs and cats killed by dogs, 90% of the time, it is from pit bulls. That's a problem. They're also very powerful when they attack. So the probability of a bite from a pit bull turning into a complex wound is 4.4 times higher than other top biting dogs, because they are very effective at what they do. They're very strong and they have a strong bite. More than half of the time they actually attack their owners or members of their owners' families. And so The problem is it is a lot of times unexpected. It is sudden. They're not just going after other things. They attack within the home a lot. I just go over some of these numbers to bring up the fact that there is a statistical problem here. There is a reality that we need to acknowledge. Okay? And we have the breed, we know what they were bred for, we have the statistics, we see how that plays out in the real world. And so this isn't something that we should just bury our heads in the sand and ignore because we all love dogs. We need to be aware of these things, we need to acknowledge them. And what do we do about them? Well, there's a lot we can do about it. I mean, we need to have this conversation. The first thing, like I said, the most important thing is just being aware of these things, because it's irresponsible not to. If you own a pit bull, it's irresponsible to ignore these things and act as if their breeding has no effect on their behavior. It does. That's just the nature of reality. Beyond that, what we can do is we can talk about what legislation is possible. There's lots of places that have legislation against certain dog breeds. Many countries in Europe and around the world have restrictions or outright bans on pit bulls. Even many counties in California have legislation. San Francisco has a rule. They have legislation that requires all pit bulls to be spayed or neutered. I think this is a good place to start. I think this is good. And if you go to the shelter, any shelter really in the state, or I assume the country, it's full of pit bulls. There's a lot of pit bulls out there. There's a lot in shelters. And so I think a spay neuter law is not something out of the question. I think it's something we should have a discussion about as a community, figure out where we want to go with that. I mean, San Francisco does it. It seems to work. San Bernardino has some laws. I mean, there's all kinds of different municipalities and counties and states throughout the country that do have legislation on this issue. Look, I would never across the board have any issue with all dogs, but it doesn't mean that we can't also be aware of the reality here. And we need to be aware of that. We need to talk about that. And so I just like to hear from the community, I guess, see where they stand on these issues. Should we do something about this? Do we just need more awareness about this? Is this an issue at all? These are just some things I'd like to hear about, because I have my thoughts, and I tend to think that better safe than sorry. We need to take precautionary measures rather than reactionary measures. That's it. That's my explanation here. That's my little talk on the pit bull situation we have here. I hope to hear from people.